Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is my friend Lavinia, who's joining us all the way from Bali, but she and I actually met earlier this year in Montreal, Canada at Running Remote, and as we got to talking, we realized it would be great to get her on About Abroad. She's living a really unique lifestyle, all originally coming from Romania and now calling Bali her home for the last 8 years, and slo-mading a lot when she's not working, so spending a lot of time traveling, but living in this wonderful exotic place, and then also building a co-living and community and startup incubator on a side of the island that is a little bit outside of the standard nomad hotspots that a lot of people migrate to when they go to Bali. So it was really interesting to hear her perspective on living a little bit more locally, talking a bit more about life in Indonesia as a whole, not just Bali, and how she's working with the locals to improve their life and get them access to remote jobs and things like that. So just really cool looking at Bali from a different perspective and understanding what you might want to do if you're interested in making the move to Bali yourself or going to visit for a while. So really enjoyed getting Lavinia's perspective. She's traveled all over the world, seen a lot, and had a ton to share that I thought was really insightful. So I really enjoyed this. I hope you will as well. Please help me in welcoming Lavinia to About Abroad. That sounds good. I mean, we're already we faced a few challenges here. You know, we're talking like monsoons, cats probably coming through the ceiling. We've got fire alarms. So like I don't know. We're off to a good start. These are the things you battle when you're abroad, right?
Absolutely, especially at the tropics, right, or in other places that are not, I don't know, Switzerland or Canada or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm living a little too privileged over here in southern Germany right now. You're bringing me back. You're making me realize I need to get out and stretch my legs, my nomad legs a little bit more. You mentioned it's monsoon season there in Bali. I actually don't know, like, what is the monsoon season like? Like, how long does it last and when does it go from until, and how intense is it?
Yeah, so the textbooks say October, November to around March or so, but with the climate change, which is a real thing in case anyone's still wondering, it's been really messed up a little bit in the last few years. So we're seeing some rain, quite big rain in, say, July as well, which should be very dry and so on. But generally, let's say October, November to March, and then April to September, October should be dry. So it's basically 2 seasons instead of 4, like in the Northern Hemisphere. And yeah, so what it's like, so it depends a little bit on the side of the island that you're on. The part of the island where I'm on, which is the quieter side of Bali, East Coast, gets a lot less rain. We're actually envied by a lot of the other inhabitants of the island. But in the rest of the island, I would say it rains pretty much every day. And it's torrential rain. It's warm, so it's not like, an autumn rain in New York, to say so, or in London, and you're cold and wet and everything. But it's quite wet, right? And then even when it doesn't rain, it's quite muggy. The air is quite muggy.
Yeah, that humid rain. But does it come down like is it like an all day thing? Like there are parts of the world where when you have like rainy season, it's like it just rains all day long, and there are others where it's just like you're gonna get a hard rain every day, but it's not not gonna last all day.
Right. I would say so in places like Ubud, because I think that's a place that a lot of people know because of Eat, Pray, Love, and it's big in the nomad scene and so on. It can be raining all day, every day for maybe a week or so sometimes. So it gets a little much. In other parts of the island, I would say it will be like, a couple hours of rain coming out of nowhere, and then it will be sunny. And then a few hours later, maybe it's going to rain again.
You could sign me up for that. I I'd be down with that.
cats and dogs, it's like the roads get flooded, like all of that. So it's not like a little bit of rain.
Does the island like change a lot during that season in terms of like the tourism, people there, locals, like does the life change or does it just go on as normal?
Well, I guess you carry a raincoat on you at all times. I think people don't really like to go places when it rains a lot. So a lot of things will get postponed. People will be like, oh, we plan to go wherever, but I'm not going to be able to make it because it's raining, right? Which when you come from a place that has four seasons and snow and, all of those things, you're like, what do you mean it's not happening because it's raining? We're just going to put a raincoat on and go. But sometimes when you see, the occasional flooding and all those things, you understand why people would rather stay put, right?
It's funny, like I don't know if it's like a mentality thing. Like, so I grew up in one of those places where there are four seasons and you don't really like adjust your life very much based on the weather. Like for example, I mean, if you wouldn't like change your plans because it's raining or a little bit of snow or it's really sunny. It's like you just kind of have your plans. I don't feel like we like looked at the weather a lot. It's just like you're just going to do your thing. You're going to go to work, even if it's hot and muggy or rainy or whatever. You're going to go out to dinner, even if it's, the weather changes. But when I moved to Spain, I found this like hilarious at first that people were, the Spanish are like very focused on the sun and like what the sun's going to be doing. So like when it's hot, they're like, oh, no, you stay inside that day because it's going to be hot. And like it's hot, but it's not like crazy hot, and like, or like, oh, no, you don't want to go to that restaurant because, it doesn't get sun on the terrace at that time. You'll want to wait like an hour later. And I'm like, yeah, but I'll be hungry at that time. So like, that's when I'll be going to, like it's hilarious. Like this was a big like cultural shift for me. And then I find myself doing it now. Like I'm like kind of obsessed with the weather and like making sure to optimize that. So I don't know why I find it like kind of interesting when you think about like monsoon season, like that really changes things or it has the potential to, but life goes on. You got to keep on moving.
Absolutely. And it's like, as you were highlighting the differences between cultures, is like hashtag priorities, is the priority that you schedule or is the priority that you're as comfortable as possible or, avoid uncertainty and all of those things. It's like all of the really interesting, if you're familiar with Hofstede's model of cultural dimensions, right? There's 6 different dimensions that explain any culture. And they are a spectrum. Tolerance to uncertainty is somewhere there. Some people are more, some cultures are more comfortable with risk and uncertainty, and some others are not. And it's reflected in those daily choices, right? And then once we've been in a place for a little too long, we cross over to the other side, the bright or the dark, depending on how you look at it, right? And we start doing those things ourselves. But you were talking about the Spaniards, and a very vivid image came to mind. So I did my last year of university in Belgium, and we were in international class, and we had quite a big Spanish presence. This is in Flanders in Belgium, so the weather is, for those of you not familiar with it, picture London, right? Like gray skies, lots of rain all the time, overcast, gray. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world, but not weather-wise, not so much, right? And at some point there was a sunny day, one sunny day, like a few hours of a window, right? And I remember 2 of my Spanish colleagues just going into literally where the rays of the sun were coming through in between the buildings and just going like, oh, soul, and just like basically worshiping the sun and just getting recharged by that. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even, and they were like, you haven't noticed that it hasn't stopped raining for like 5 days, and I was like, no, I didn't really, but now that I see you, yeah.
I've literally seen restaurants put up signs saying like closed for rain. In Spain, like is raining, we're not opening, because they're just like, people aren't going to come out if it's raining. And I always found it like hilarious. Like, one, it speaks to like the mindset around work. It's like, yeah, we'll get work done whenever, it's not that big a deal. And then 2, like just hyper focused on good weather and sun. They love the sun, and now I'm addicted to it too.
Absolutely. And what you just said brought another example to mind. Here in Bali, there's an art gallery that literally has a sign where you would have the opening hours. It has a sign that says open every day, all day, unless tired.
I love it. So that's does that kind of epitomize the culture, the attitude towards work? Is it kind of that like more relaxed mentality? I don't know what more means in this context. Depends on where you're coming from. But would you kind of say it's a pretty relaxed mentality?
I mean, islanders tend to be like that everywhere, right? It's not so much a Bali specific thing, but yeah, I think there's a more relaxed attitude. I also think that there's a different lens or angle to it, where the Balinese have been making a living from hospitality for so long that the comforts and the wishes and the wants of the guests are top priority, right? And they compromise sometimes a little too much in that direction. I often, work with my team on setting healthy boundaries and, pushing back if someone is like really, really rude to you or are asking for unreasonable things and so on, right? So there's two different ways of looking at it. Yeah, it's a very sunny, tropical, beautiful island, right, where people are maybe more relaxed about time, right, than in other places and so on. But at the same time, they do work ridiculously long hours. 6-day week is the norm for many jobs and so on.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good perspective. How long have you been there now in Bali?
So I've been in Bali for almost 8 years now, but I haven't been in Bali this entire time. So I'm not in Bali all year round. I'm usually in Bali, let's say 6 to 8 months. And then I'm location independent or mobile, right, for the rest of the time. So I'll do like usually about 3-4 months, and then I'll be away for a couple of months back here and rinse and repeat. So yeah, with Livit, we have company in Europe, and we have a couple of partner companies as well in Europe that we work closely with. And I'm originally from Romania, so I'm not a vampire. The jury's still out on that. And I like to nomad a bit as well. I'm just back from Vietnam, which I loved. Literally just back from a few weeks there. I know we were talking about recording while I was there, and I just didn't know what kind of recording conditions I'd find. So we're meeting today.
Nice. That's a pretty sweet cadence, like 3-4 months in Bali, couple months on the road, back to your home base. You've got your, I imagine you've got your community and your routine and your life there, but you can still go off and explore and adventure. Kind of fills both sides of the equation, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it really works really well for me. It's the sweet spot, and I've experimented with different, types of cadence, and I think this is what really works for me right now. Once I'm here for a number of months, you kind of get island fever at some point, right? So you want to go in and explore, especially if you're the kind of person that likes to travel a lot and has lived in different places and so on. I get that, hunger or wanderlust, I guess we'd call it, right? And then once I'm away for more than 2 months or so, I really miss Bali and I miss my routines here. And I'm like, okay, time to go back. And I find that once I come back, I appreciate it a lot more once again, right? Like I'm just like reminded of all the things that I'm grateful for. And all the things that made me choose to be here for longer term.
I think there's something like so important wrapped up in there is that like there's often this like really strong desire for people to move to a foreign place or to start like nomading and traveling. But like at some point, the novelty of whatever you do, no matter how exciting it is at first, starts to wane a little bit. And so if you can figure out a way to renew that novelty occasionally, maybe not even as frequently as you're able to do it, like what you're doing is like picture perfect for a lot of people, but maybe for some people it's more like they want to be in one place for a year and then go travel for a month or two or something. But however you can keep that novelty fire going and burning, I think is really important. And I've seen people like we're all like playing with this, and it's probably constantly changing for all of us too. I'm seeing a lot of people in the kind of nomad world, expat world, experimenting with this as remote work becomes more accessible, and as people are traveling and adventuring a little bit more, they're pushing the boundaries, figuring out what works for them, and coming up with the perfect formula. And I think it all kind of revolves around that, like making sure that the experience stays novel and exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind when you're talking about that is the hedonic treadmill, right? Like just the idea that our brains are so faulty in that way that they get used to good things so fast, right? They become the new normal. You know, you get a new computer or you move to a new place or you're in a new relationship and you're really relishing it and you're loving it and so on. And then 3 months later, that's your base, right? And no longer appreciate it so much. So renewing that hedonic treadmill or like restarting it, I think is the secret to consistency in many ways, right? And consistency when you think of anything, when you think of workouts, you think of places, you think of relationships, you think of businesses and so on, right? Like if we can find a way to insert that novelty in all of those things in some kind of way instead of leaving it, right? Leaving the business, leaving the workout routine, the relationship and so on, then to me that is the secret to consistency and sustainability and in many ways happiness.
I know, right? I totally feel that way. Do you ever feel a little sense of like, I don't know, I don't want to call it guilt, but it might be a tinge of guilt because sometimes I feel like it's ridiculous that I need to reset that baseline when like the baseline keeps getting better in a way or keeps going up and I keep trying to reset that and find the novelty in things that perhaps a year or 5 or 10 years ago I would have thought was like a dream, you know, like for example, I left Spain this year because I was kind of like, let's just call it bored with Spain, been there for many years, was ready to experience something different and like come up to Germany and spend 6 months or so in Germany. And then I look back and I think like, how could you get bored with being in Spain? Like, how could you want something else? That's kind of like selfish of you or like that, like how spoiled you are, you know, that kind of thing. And so I find this like creeping into the brain sometimes a little bit like, man, you've got it so good. Like you can't keep wanting more and being dissatisfied with what you've got when what you've got is something that you could have only aspired to X number of years ago.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. There is sometimes a tinge of, I guess, in lack of a better word, guilt would be it. But
it's not the right word for sure, right? It's like it's not perfect, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, like I would say self-conscious, probably. Like I'm self-conscious about, comparing my problems with maybe other people's problems, right? Because they say in life you never fully eliminate problems, you just graduate to better problems, right? And that's the journey I guess we're always on, right? To acquire better problems and leave the worst ones behind, right? Yeah, I think I've had a lot of interesting moments thinking about this over time because one thing that I've noticed a lot over the years is that people say, oh, you're so lucky a lot, right? But we always look at other people's lives with, the lens of seeing them from a distance, right? And seeing maybe only the positive parts and the awesome bits, right? And I think, when you live abroad, when you decide to make a life abroad, either fully in one place or moving around and so on, you actually work on it a lot, right? You work on logistics, you work on financials, you work on social opportunities, you work on personal development, so you don't pack up and leave the first time you're really frustrated with that place, you work on a lot of things, and I don't know if lucky is quite captures it, right? It is a choice that people are making, and I know that some of your listeners are, interested in living abroad or about to engage in that adventure or already doing it, and I think we need to have that mature approach to it, right? That it is a choice we make, and it may look very lucky and blessed and fortunate and so on, but there's also all this other sides to it, just like great businesses or great relationships or great workouts. There's, they look great on Instagram, but there's a lot of work behind it. Right?
Totally. Yeah. It's not for the faint of heart, like for sure. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. And I've also had that conversation where people say, oh, that you're lucky, you have this. And I feel very fortunate for sure. And there's a lot of privilege baked into a lot of this. But I think it's also, as you said, very mature to have the conversation that, it takes a lot of effort and willpower to make it happen. For some more than others, for sure. Like there is an absolute privilege involved with, the passport lottery and plenty of other things. But it's just to say that if you want to embark on this journey, like you have to be prepared to roll with the punches sometimes and put in the extra effort and find your time and energy sometimes soaked up by things that you'd probably rather not be doing. Visa paperwork and things like that, come to mind first of all. But there's a lot of things that come along with this lifestyle, and it's okay to acknowledge those too.
Sure, for sure. And the nudge here is to for everyone to know that you're not doing it wrong. If you're encountering, harder times, and if you're encountering difficulty, and if something feels like it really, excuse my French, sucks, right? Or whatever, it's absolutely normal, right? Like people who have lived abroad for a long time know those times very well and are able to, have the resilience to go through those bits, right? And I think places like Bali or Spain that are sunny and beautiful and photogenic and picturesque and look amazing, right? Create that unrealistic expectation that's like, oh, you live in paradise. What else do you need? And I'm like, where should we start on my 34 item list?
I have a list I can share with you. I remember, you and I, we've known each other like virtually, I guess, for a couple of years now, like following each other's work and such and connecting online. But we finally had a chance to meet in Montreal this past year at Running Remote. We were both given the great honor of sharing the stage as we both won some awards for some remote work stuff. And that was really fun to finally get to chat with you in person backstage before we went out there. And I remember something you mentioned to me that I didn't know at the time about your story, because I just kind of pictured like, oh, you moved to Bali and you lived there. But like, I think correct me if I'm wrong, like, and the number is not super important. It's just kind of was mind blowing to me. You've like traveled and lived around in like 30 something different countries, including like the one that sticks out in my head is Azerbaijan. Am I remembering all of this correctly?
Yeah, so I've lived, right? Which to me, to qualify a place as having lived in, you have to be able to say that you've paid electricity, gas, rent bills, and those things, right? Like not just visiting for one room or whatever, right? So I've lived in 8 different countries on 4 continents, and then I have explored another 30 something. I kind of lost count. It's probably close to 40 now. And different reasons took me to all these countries, right? A part of it was studies, exchange programs when I was younger. A part of it was work as an expat, which is what I did in Azerbaijan for the majority of the time there. A part of it was nomading, right? Or just exploring while working remotely, which a big part of the world is also discovering right now. I've been doing it for about 10 years or so. And I actually moved to Bali from Azerbaijan, where I had been for 4 years before that.
Wow. So I only have met one other person that I know of that has spent any significant time in Azerbaijan, and I didn't get a chance to like speak with this person in depth. So, I mean, this isn't an episode about Azerbaijan, but I'm genuinely just curious, like if you can share some insights on what life was like in Azerbaijan, because I have little to no context at all.
So I initially moved there to expand an exchange program for young leaders. So both incoming and outgoing, and preparing people for those experiences as well. And that was a 1-year assignment. And then I did that for about a year, and then I got in touch. I was put in touch with a company from Dubai that was looking to expand in the region. They were doing large events, mostly on topics around human resources and marketing, with top speakers, and then some consultancy and training and events. And I stayed for 3 more years and brought that company from a girl with a laptop to market leader. And that provided an interesting opportunity to see all of that. Both of those assignments, to say so, provided an interesting opportunity to see the very different facets and parts of the society in Azerbaijan and the region as a whole. So I did a bit of work with Georgia and Turkey and Iran, the best countries to work in as a woman, right? So, so Azerbaijan is a very, very it's a fascinating country. It's a very interesting place. It sits at the intersection of different former empires and on the Silk Road, right? So the biggest influences there are like, because people ask like, how should I even picture it? Like, what's the food like? What do people look like? And so on, right? So it's a Turkic country, so not Turkish, but Turkic. The language is Turkic, and is part of most of the other stans, right, are Turkic countries. So the language is based on Old Turkish. Basically, they were part of the Ottoman Empire for a long time, and they were at different times in history part of the Persian Empire, so present-day Iran, and then the Tsarist Empire, so Russia and Soviet Union and so on. So and when you think of those cultures, when you think of Iran and Russia, the country, so Azerbaijan is basically sandwiched in between those countries, right? Probably not the most comfortable neighbors to have as a small country, right? Those two neighbors are very, very different from each other, right? And you throw in the mix the EU and the US and all those, international strategic interests that you may have to wrangle as a small country in that region, and it makes for just a fascinating place, both culturally and politically and everything, right? So it's culturally it's super, super interesting. The food is delicious, right? Different people will tell you different things about the culture, right? Some people feel more Turkish, some people feel more like Muslim, some people feel more secular or towards Russian because they were educated in the Soviet Union and they still speak Russian and so on. So it's really a mix of everything, right? Just fascinating to explore, really.
I'll bet. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my good friends over at Greenback Tax. As an American citizen, I'm from one of only 2 countries in the entire world that requires I pay taxes on my global income, regardless of which country I'm actually living in. So when I started my expat journey back in 2015, I knew my tax situation was about to get complicated. Fortunately, I discovered Greenback and I've never looked back. Greenback is 100% focused on helping U.S. expats with their tax situation, and to date, they've filed almost 50,000 returns for nearly 15,000 happy customers from more than 200 different countries. After 7 years working together, I can say with confidence that they make one of the most painful parts of life abroad an absolute breeze with their automated systems, friendly advisors, and expertise in the very specific niche of U.S. expat taxes. Also, for those of you who may have fallen behind on your taxes and/or you're trying to get ahead of tax season in 2023, Greenback has your back here as well. They can assist with late filings to ensure you don't encounter any problems with the IRS and to make sure you start 2023 off right. Tax season is on the horizon. Learn more about Greenback today by going to greenbacktaxservices.com via the link in the show notes. Hey guys, if you're still around and enjoying this episode, then I think you might actually like our once a month newsletter as well. If you'd like to sign up, just open up the show notes of the episode you're currently listening to, scroll down, and look for aboutabroad.com/newsletter. It takes about 30 seconds to sign up. It's a fantastic way to support the show, and I think you'll be pleased with the information that we provide every month as well. Thanks a lot for listening. Hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. That sounds like an incredible place to see. Like, I'm kind of fascinated by these countries that are a fusion of not even countries, even like cities or regions within certain areas, like where there's just this fusion of ancient cultures or two countries where there used to be a different border and now there's a border that's encapsulated another part of a previous country. And you're like, you have this incredible fusion of people. And then you throw in, as you say, like all the political matters of like the countries who are your neighbors. And it just creates this, like you could just sit there and watch what's happening in a place like that and be fascinated for a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one example that comes to mind is, right, you'll go to the villages, for example, and someone will serve you vodka at 7 a.m., but at the same time, they will tell you they're a proud Muslim.
Wow. See, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Like, I mean, how do you break that down? Like, I have so many questions I want to ask that person. It's incredible though. Like I would just sit
Yeah,
back and watch.
and for me that just dismantles the box, right? Those boxes that were like Muslims are like this and Russians are like that and this people are like that. And then, here comes an Azeri person and you have to blow up the whole thing and be like, I just want to get to know you as a person with all those things that, don't make sense, right? Perhaps for an outsider. It's a very interesting experience, and it teaches you a very interesting lesson, right? That the way we see the world, we need those stereotypes and we need those cliches because our minds would implode if we didn't have any of those, right? Like if we had to invent how we interact with the world every morning, right? But at the same time, we have to question how long they serve us, right? And in what situations they serve us. And I would say that culturally, we are more often than not much better served to not have those stereotypes and to put people in those boxes.
I had a conversation with a guest on the show previously where we were discussing how like it might sound like a little bit like hyperbolic, like a little bit over the top to say that remote work is something that can kind of like save us in a lot of ways. And it's not just remote work. It's more about like the ability to peer past the stereotypes that we have in place of certain cultures and people. And the whole idea of the conversation was basically just like, we're all human. We come from these places that are behind these imaginary lines and that we call borders. But generally like we're a lot more alike than we are different. And I just found it fascinating to think about because she brought it up through the context of remote work and how like that's changed her viewpoint because she's working with people like not just like sitting down and having lunch with one day or meeting on a tourist bus or something, but like solving really hard problems with people from various foreign corners of the world, working through them with their personal challenges, knowing what they're going through as monsoon season hits in Bali or as an earthquake hits or as a war breaks out or whatever. Like you're getting to know people in a very deep way all around the world. And that is very humanizing. That changes the way we look at people and makes us recognize those differences aren't as extreme as we think they might be. And so I think it's kind of interesting. Like, yeah, it could sound a little bit extreme to say that, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of reality to it. And I know we both kind of like live in this.
Yeah, it really deeply resonates. And the first thing that comes to mind is not to get philosophical here, but something that I read once that Dalai Lama said, right? I spent a bit of time in Tibet. Obviously, he's not there, but I tried to familiarize myself with his work. And one of the things he says is that the how advanced, how progressive, how advanced we are as human beings, the measure of that should be how wide is the circle of beings that we identify with, right? It used to be this tiny little tribe, right? And then we fought with the other tribe over food, and then, a clan, a tribe, and then a nation state, right? And then race, right? All the questions about why are certain wars or conflicts and the refugees from there being treated in different ways than other ones who belong to different religions and races and so on. And then we go beyond race and we say human beings, and then maybe we want to say living creatures or whatever is next, right? Like that should be where we aim to go. And I really like that, right? Because I never thought of it as like, yeah, that should be our goal, to no longer identify only with people who look like us or are around us or that we know, but to create this level of feeling togetherness with and identifying with the joys and perils of a wider variety of humans or even non-humans, if we think of it that way, right? So I think for me it's interesting because I've been in the nomad or location independent community for such a long time, although I would identify more as a location independent professional entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it, and a slo-mad, right? Like I don't think fast travel and just checking things off a country list is actually very productive, right? But I think that, travel can be different for different people. So everybody should be spending the amount of time that they want to. But something that has been a little bit of a frustration for me has been nomad communities are often bubbles, right? Wherever they are. And it's understandable. It's fully understandable that is the, primary tendency, because you're looking for people who are foreigners where you are, who are like-minded, who have similar problems, of where to find that SIM card and, my rate broke the first time this week, those things. So, whilst it's understandable, I also think we should challenge ourselves as people living abroad in whatever capacity, as expats, as travelers, as nomads, whatever we identify as, to go out of those bubbles, right? Out of the resort compound, bubble community that looks and thinks like you, all of those things, right?
Yeah, I think this is really important, and it flipping it around, that really resonates with me, and it's something that I've if it's a pendulum, or a spectrum, like I've swung back and forth on that in certain places, but I think it's always been very important to me to feel like I'm living a little bit like a local, and I've actually kind of like not purposefully at all, but I've maybe subconsciously sort of avoided these places where it's kind of the standard nomad hotspot or something like that, because I was just like, I guess I was always thinking like, I'm going abroad or I'm going to this foreign place to feel like a foreigner. Like I like that feeling. I want to be forced to speak the other language, or like to struggle through some of those things. And it's not right or wrong. Like, it's just, for me, that's what I think naturally I've been called to. But then there are these like really epic places where you see like people gather, in a place for a reason, and community forms in those places. And on the flip side of that, sometimes, you miss, like, I think, wow, that would be really cool to be a part of that. I mean, to be honest, like Bali is one of these places for me where I have this desire to go, but I also have this image of like just a lot of Westerners hanging out in Bali. And I think like it looks amazing. That community looks like it's thriving and it would be lots of fun, but I keep like not prioritizing it for some reason. In fairness, I was supposed to go to this area in 2020 and COVID had other plans. But anyway, it's just to say like there's some kind of like scale to weigh there, I guess. And I think it's interesting. And I guess like having you here on the show, I'm interested to get your perspective on like, where does Bali sit on this, and maybe even breaking it down further, like different places on Bali. But what are your thoughts on where Bali sits on this spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at nomad lists, right? I don't know about just now, but for a very long time, Bali was and probably still is it was really the number one nomad destination in the world, right? And it's probably always top three or something like that, right? I think what I would love people to know about Bali is that when people think about Bali, they think of Canggu and Ubud, right? Especially in the expat or nomad community. And there's nothing wrong with those places, but those are two tiny little dots in it's not a huge island, but it's a fairly big island, right? With 5 billion people on it. So those are two tiny spots that are quite overpopulated right now, very crowded. Traffic is bad and all of those things. They do have amazing community, and it's very dynamic. There's tons of things happening. If you want to meet people, if you want to go to events 7 times a week, that's the place to be, right? Especially Canggu and so on. But at the same time, I would encourage people to look beyond that. I feel very strongly about connecting with, as I was, I guess, saying before, connecting with locals and immersing myself into the local culture. I think one of the top reasons that foreigners first actually started coming to Bali for was the locals and the local culture, and we've lost that somehow, right? We're now gathering with each other and hanging out in our bubbles, and for many people who live here, the only locals they know are service staff, staff, right? Waiters and maids and so on. And for me, that doesn't work. So we built a co-working and startup hub on the quiet side of the island. We're on the East Coast in Sanur. A lot of people that are in Bali, even for a while, don't even know where that is. It's not completely off the map, but it's not, one of the main spots. And the reasons for doing that were because we always felt very strongly about having a mixed, integrated community with locals, with Balinese locals, and then with Indonesians from other islands. As some of your listeners might know, Indonesia is a huge archipelago with 17,000 islands. Bali is a tiny part of it, right? The scale of this place. So if you look at the easternmost point and the westernmost point, the distance between those two is larger than London to Tehran in Iran.
Wow.
So it's in
Serious?
many ways
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's in many ways its own continent with hundreds of languages and religions and cultures and ethnicities and everything, right? So as it may be coming through, and you may be able to tell, I love Bali, I love Indonesia, right? And I just think it's a pity to come to Bali and not see those things. So get out of those areas, be in those areas if you want that connection and so on, but also go and co-work with locals, right? This is what we wanted to do with Livit Hub, and we are very adamant about maintaining as much as possible 50-50 membership, right? Also in our team and so on, right? In our team is actually majority Indonesians, and get out of Bali as well if you come to Indonesia, right? Like go to Flores, go to Java, go to Sulawesi, to Sumba, to Borneo. There's just so much stuff to explore that I'm sometimes a little bit perplexed, right? When people say like, oh, I went to Indonesia, I don't like Canggu, it was very crowded, and then I left, right?
They left so much on the table.
Yes, it's about 99.9999% of Indonesia, right? And Indonesians are such wonderful people, right? Like I have some of my closest friends here, many of my closest friends here are Indonesians. A majority of the team that I work with the closest are Indonesians. I've just, developed such deep connections and collaborations with people who are deeply rooted here that it's hard for me to watch that. Oh, I came to Canggu, I stayed for a week, it was crowded, I didn't like it, and I left, and I don't like Indonesia. Right?
Yeah, that's tough to swallow. I mean, it's like going to you could throw out so many parallels. Like go to New York and you just go to Times Square for 5 minutes, and then you're like, okay, yeah, I hate New York. This sucks, and then you move on. There's so many places. You go to Rome and go sit in by the Colosseum. It's like chaos and it's cool to see, but then you don't really get to see what real Italian life is like. So I think that's always like a staple in these tourist places where there's lots of people gathering from other parts of the world. Like, great, go see it, experience it, because that's part of the experience. But don't forget that there's so much beyond those places. And you mentioned Canggu and Ubud. Is there a place, like if someone was following in your footsteps and coming to Bali, but decided they agree, like those aren't the places that I would be in. Is there a place you would recommend, an area of the island, a specific city or anything like that you would say like, yeah, this is probably a place that you would go to, for example?
Yeah, I picked Sonora because I love it here, so I'm gonna, do a shameless plug to to that. So, it's on the East Coast. It's quiet, so don't tell too many people, right? And then it's got all the conveniences that people, like good cafes, coffee, gym, yoga, co-working space, beach. It's the only place in Bali where you can walk and cycle around. Normally, the default in Bali is motorcycles, right? But it's not the only place, right? Uluwatu is an interesting place that more people have been moving to. There's we sort of call it Canggu refugees, right? Because people get excited, move to Canggu, and then they can't take it, and then they go to these other places, right? So we get quite a few Canggu refugees, and Uluwatu's getting some as well. There's places in the north that are very quiet, but especially for people who love diving or water sports, Ahmed and so on, Sidiman, right? I would say that, if you want to live here long term and Canggu or Ubud are not your jam, Sanur or Uluwatu for long term living would be your choices, right? And then there's obviously lots of other smaller places where you can go and spend a week or two, but then they get
you need some infrastructure there, most likely, for most people, not everyone. But that's good. And you touched on, like you mentioned, like if you want to come live in Bali, like what is your perspective on the likelihood, possibility of somebody moving there? Like you've obviously made it work for the long term, but like I'm speaking kind of specifically from the visa standpoint, but just more generally, like I have the impression that Indonesia, Bali is very open. Some countries are very closed. They like put up borders. They don't really want people coming in and staying beyond their 90 days tourist visa. But I have the impression that Bali is very like, they're gonna facilitate making it possible if you choose to stay. And rather than putting up those borders, they're trying to break them down. I know they've just introduced something kind of like a digital nomad visa. I think it's still having some kinks worked out. And for a long time, this has been a place that people went and spent many months and years without really much problem. So what's your perspective as someone that's been there for like 8 years now?
Yeah, it's not a quick answer, so let's dive into it a little bit. So for a very long time, remote work was not regulated or recognized, right? Working from Indonesia and working in Indonesia seemed to be the same in the eyes of the authorities, right? So there was this very gray zone of like, what if I'm working on my laptop, but I don't make money in Indonesia? What kind of visa should I be on, right? And there was never a clear answer. Things are changing. So there's a number of things happening. One is that there is a visa called B211, which is widely known as the social visa, which is now officially announced as being the legal way for digital nomads or remote workers to be on. This is a 60-day initial visa that can be extended up to 6 months. So you basically, just have an extension every month, and that can bring you to 6 months. There's also a lot of talk about this digital nomad visa, which is for allegedly for 5 years, but there's been nothing really official announced. I know a lot of even big international media outlets featured the story, and we were getting so many phone calls and WhatsApp messages. How can I get the digital nomad visa? And we were like, it's not there yet, So I think like in other countries, the authorities here you've got different poles of power, right? So you've got, tourism and creative industries, you've got immigration, you've got manpower, and they don't always see eye to eye, right? And for a visa like that to happen, they do have to all agree on that, right? So the famous 5-year digital nomad visa, tax-free, not yet there. But as of now, November 2022. However, just last week, there's a new visa that they announced that is called the second home visa, which kind of replaces the, let's say, retirement visa, but no longer has an age requirement, and allows people who have a certain amount of money or can show a certain amount of money to have a visa for 5 years, right? It still doesn't allow them to work with Indonesian clients or for Indonesian companies, but it's a way of being here fully legally for 5 to 10 years. So that would be my not short, not super long answer.
That's the right dynamic. The truth is, like, it's so fluid, it's changing rapidly, and like you can't. It's really hard to keep up with what the governments are doing. You kind of have to do your own research in these spaces. I always say, like, and I think this is true in Bali, that it's very affordable and recommended to hire like a local representative there just to help you with those processes and help you navigate the red tape that is sure to exist on that path.
Absolutely. And we are with Livit. We've done it for so long because we've incubated a number of startups that have both locals and foreigners working for them. So we've developed a good system for staying up to date with all these changes and everything. So if anyone is interested to move to Bali and wants to really understand the latest, our legal department is happy to hear from them and to guide them. Yeah, that's something we had to do for ourselves, and then we got known for as well. So
that's a really good point. I mean, we should clarify, and I'm actually kind of curious. I know the high level, but I would love to hear it from your mouth. Like, what exactly is Livit? You mentioned it's a co-working and startup incubator. You guys are helping people with things like that. So yeah, like tell us a little bit about Livit, because I think this is an important part of the story.
Yeah, sure. So Livit is let's say a larger umbrella, which is a support system for entrepreneurs and remote workers and startup teams. So under that umbrella, we have a number of things going on. One of them is Livit Hub, which is a physical, facility, has shared offices, co-working events, and so on. And then we also have a couple of the other things we have going on is we have a number of things that we actually do location agnostic. So we work with people from 15, 20 countries at any given time, basically. So a part of our team is working on physical things and a part of our team is fully remote, located in different countries. Some of those things are recruitment services, automation for recruitment, building pipelines of talent. We also act as a fractional HR business partner, right, for businesses who are scaling and growing, and usually with tech founders, right, who are very good at product and have traction. They perhaps got investment and now they have to make a whole team and business operation happen. So we come in and help with those things because, as I said a while ago, we incubated our own businesses. So we learned a lot of what to do and not to do. And then we have this whole part around doing business or being in Indonesia. So local services that have to do with compliance, with finance, with legal, and all of those things, right? And then we also have a couple of other brands. One of them is the Remote Skills Academy, which is a education platform for Indonesians that want to learn to work remotely. That was born out of my frustration with this big gaps between, expats and digital nomads and the reality for the locals around them. And then we also have Project Getaway, which is a team workation brand. So if you want to bring your team to Bali and you want to have a productive space to work from, to meet, to do a hackathon, a sprint, or whatever, and then you also want to explore the island, we are a one-stop solution for that.
Oh, that's God! What you're doing all the fun stuff. Like this is the kind of like it's a lot of work, I know, but like this all sounds like so much fun to be working on. I mean, helping other businesses thrive, helping the locals get access to great work. You built a tribe there. I have this vision, and from what I hear from other people who have been there, it's this amazing and working environment and like familiar community that's built there. And then hosting, you put the cherry on top with like hosting retreats for teams that want to come to Bali. Like that doesn't sound terrible either. You enjoy like the day to day? I mean, are you able to enjoy the fruits of the labors? Because you worked hard to get to this point for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? Like it's a lot simpler to just niche on one product or one service and just scale that, right? We chose to be a support system that does various things where people can find support of different kinds. And actually our clients are usually our typical client takes anything between 2 and 8 types of services from us. So we invest in this long-term relationships. And I think that's one of the parts I really enjoy about it. My measure of success is not, you may agree with me here. Like it's nice, the big stages, the awards, right? You and I were sharing a stage just a few months ago, right? They're milestones, they're beautiful moments, but your life is not made of those beautiful moments. Your life is made of the mundane Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And my measure of success in life of happiness and success in life is, do I enjoy enjoy that mundane Wednesday? And I do, right? Like, it's not every day, all day. Every job, every role, every business has a shit sandwich that you occasionally have to eat up, right? But for me, is like, do I enjoy what I do a majority of the time? Do I feel like my work is contributing towards something a little bit bigger than just myself and my own comfort, right? Do I feel like I'm hopefully contributing positively to people's lives, right? To help them, as you're saying, to help them grow a company where people enjoy working, right? Do I help people get jobs or reskill or upskill themselves and so on? And I think with our team, we're doing such a good job with that. Like, I was just like writing recently about how our productivity per team member head is just ridiculous. Like, we're doing all of that with a team of 18 people. So all of those things, 18 people in Bali and across the world. And yeah, it's I do enjoy it. And then, when you get those awards, or recently we were actually, marketing team said I had to brag about this. So we are actually one of the best places to work in the whole continent of Asia, and Middle East. So yeah.
Congratulations. That's a big one.
Thank you. And a top 3 in Indonesia, also best places to work. And you're going head to head with giants that have huge budgets and so on. And to me, it just shows me that when you have a soul, you have a goal as well, right? That goals that have a soul and no point beyond just the numbers are quite empty for me, right? But yeah, so the short answer is I do enjoy it and I have a lot of fun.
It seems like you do. It shines through in the work, and even more so when I get a chance to talk with you about it here. I can see the enjoyment that you get out of it, and it's awesome. Keep putting out those good vibes. And I also totally agree with you on. I've said before, like, one of my goals with moving abroad was that I wanted my everyday mundane to become exciting. I wanted, like, I've used the example of, like, when I go to the grocery store, I want to kind of look forward to that because it's going to be a little bit of an adventure. Like, I don't speak the language, so I've got to figure out how to say onions and tomatoes today. Like, that sounds like a fun Tuesday in a way. And all of a sudden, instead of going to the grocery store and thinking of it as a task, I'm thinking of it as like an exciting adventure and opportunity in its own little way. So I love the way you put that, like using that barometer to measure success, and less so on the milestones and the awards and the high and low points, and maybe more so on the day to day and how that goes. So wise words, Lavinia. Thank you for sharing. I think that's an awesome way to wrap it up. I really appreciate all the information you shared, and we're going to make sure to share links to all those places, all the companies within the company, and make sure that people have access to that in the show notes. But while they're listening, can you just share where people, any websites, URLs that you would direct people to if they want to follow along and learn more?
Absolutely. So we are at liv.it. We're not in Italy, but we picked that because, it's our name. So that's let's say the mother website that redirects to all the other things. Remoteskills.academy is where people can find information about the academy and potentially supporting, Indonesians, Southeast Asians that go through an upskilling, reskilling process. And we're going to have in the show notes a special landing page for your listeners who may want to come and check out Bali. We are, as I was saying, a one-stop shop both for individuals and teams that want to come and experience Bali in all this with all the beautiful things that it has, but also an immersive cultural experience surrounded by locals and so on as well. So we can sort that for people if they want to come for a team workation or for a experience working from paradise on their own. So we'll make sure that your listeners get a really special deal and special package on that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. Look out for that in the show notes. Everybody likes a good deal, and when it comes with a trip to Bali involved, that sucks even less. So thank you for that. Thanks again for sharing all the information and a bit about your story. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. I'm glad we finally made it happen, and looking forward to hopefully crossing paths in real life again before too long. Maybe in Bali.
Likewise, Chase, thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to hearing some of your listeners. Please feel free to get in touch with us. You'll have my email address. Even if you're just curious about something or you want to ask something about Bali, remote work, and the programs we have and so on, we're always happy to widen our our network and so on. Thank you once again for having me, and it's been such a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.